Hello there, my name's Mike and I'm your English teacher on this pre-intermediate grammar course. I'm going to take you through each lesson step by step and give a brief explanation of what each lesson contains. Lesson 1, we cover tenses, verbs, nouns, adjectives, adverbs and linking words. Wow, action-packed I hear you say. And true enough, the first lesson includes many aspects of grammar, many of which we also look in greater detail in other lessons. In fact, the first lesson just touches on the way in which we use the present simple tense and gives some examples in order to get you to concentrate on the subject of the course as a whole, i.e. grammar. There will also be examples of linking words and a reminder of what verbs and nouns are. Of course, you couldn't mention grammar without talking about adjectives and adverbs, and we concentrate in particular on adverbs of frequency. The first lesson concludes with a look at the future tense, or, to be more precise, making future plans. Lesson 2, we look at the present and past tenses when talking about habits and routines. Now this lesson also has examples of everyday verbs and makes a special mention of the difficulty that English language learners often have in trying to pronounce the ed endings when using verbs in the past simple tense. In addition to pronunciation, we also look at the spelling rules of ed endings, listing a number of examples. At the end of the spelling rules section, there is an exercise where you can test your knowledge. The lesson finishes with another look at adjectives. We specifically look at the order of adjectives when describing something or someone. In English, if you get the order wrong, it can be very confusing, particularly if you're talking to a native English speaker like me. Lesson 3 concentrates on phrasal verbs and social expressions. In particular, we look at prepositions, those little words that give all English language learners big headaches. However, in this lesson, we take a look at prepositions of place. Another problem when learning English is that there are so many words which sound the same but have completely different spellings. So this lesson covers a number of these words and gives you a practical exercise to try out for yourself. Phrasal verbs, like prepositions, can give many English language learners big problems. Phrasal verbs are studied in much greater detail at higher levels of English. However, at this level of English, I believe it is important to sample, just as a taster, a selection of phrasal verbs. In addition, you are given the opportunity to practice the correct use of phrasal verbs for yourself. We finished the third lesson by explaining the use of everyday social expressions. We look at examples and there are some practical exercises for you to complete. Lesson 4, like Lesson 1, covers a number of grammar aspects. In this lesson we look at syllables, time markers, spelling again, punctuation and sentence structure. Lesson 4 begins with syllables and then considers alphabetical order. We then move on to the spellings of verbs and nouns, plus a look at time markers, capital letters and commas. The lesson concludes with the way we use simple and compound sentences, with a practical exercise to test your knowledge. Lesson 5 consists of some more everyday situations and covers vocabulary and letter writing. This lesson also takes another look at the order of adjectives, plus the use of capital letters and full stops. We complete lesson 5 by looking at the layout of a letter and correcting grammar mistakes. In lesson 6, we look at some more useful vocabulary and talk about likes and dislikes. We also take another look at future plans, prepositions when making arrangements, and we make a special effort to study the spelling of ing forms. The spelling of ing forms involves a number of rules. So we look at these rules, and at the end of the lesson you will have the opportunity once again to test your knowledge. Lesson 7 covers comparatives, conjunctions, time phrases, and another look at the present and the past tenses. We start lesson 7 by talking about comparing things, comparatives. We also look at the spelling rules for comparatives. The lesson then moves on to conjunctions before finishing off with comparing the present with the past and a practical exercise for you to test your knowledge. In lesson 8, we take a look at some of the grammar aspects we have already covered in the course so far. So we try out some more time phrases and some personal writing. But we also consider more vocabulary with words that go together. Of course, you can never have enough of adjectives, so we are going to look at some more descriptive words yet again. In this lesson, there are a number of useful test your knowledge skills exercises for you to try your hand at, with the correct answers provided for you. Lesson 9 tackles something a little bit different from all the other lessons we have looked at so far. In lesson 9, we look at work-related situations. There are practical exercises on job advertisements, application forms, using the telephone, job interviews, and we finish the lesson by sampling some body language. Lesson 10 concentrates on the present and past tenses in greater detail than we have looked at in previous lessons. We consider the present simple, the present continuous, past simple and past continuous forms, as well as time expressions and prepositions again. Lesson 11, we've got quantity and articles. They're the two grammar topics which we look at in this lesson, just quantity and articles. When expressing quantity, we also have to consider countable, 1, 2, 3, 4, and uncountable nouns. The second part of this lesson is taken up solely with how we use articles. Now, articles for some English language students can prove to be very difficult to understand. We therefore give a number of examples of how to use articles in the correct way. We finish the course in the same way that we started it, with an action-packed lesson, Lesson 12. Lesson 12 looks at superlatives, conditionals, plus the present perfect and past perfect tenses. Did I hear you say wow again, or was that just a big sigh? Woo! As with many of the previous lessons throughout the course, Lesson 12 has a number of useful exercises for you to test your English language skills. One final note to end on. I have tried throughout each lesson to keep the language I use relatively simple. However, you should always have your dictionary at hand so that you can look up any words you don't understand. Thanks for listening, and I look forward to seeing you in Lesson 1.